Hello, friends. Welcome to Around the Valley. Our other co-host, Will, is not going to be here today. He's out in Utah skiing with his brother, Pete, so I want to send out wishes to Pete. Hope you're doing all right. So I got a couple guests today. We're going to switch up the style a little bit. My friend Bob Dalton here. He's here to talk about the NBA All-Star Weekend with me right to start. So the NBA All-Star Weekend was this past weekend. They have a bunch of different skills competitions, the three-point competition, point guard skills, dunk contest. Just wanted to get your take on what you thought about this year's festivities.
Well, I think the point guard skills competition is a good idea. I don't like that the guys don't really go that hard. I think if you had guys that went as hard as they can, then it would be a lot better. I thought the dunk contest was better than it has been. I still don't like all the props. I know that you do like the props.
I do. I like the props. I think it's originality because all these guys can do the same dunks. There's a multitude of guys who can jump from the free throw line now and dunk. You know, Michael Jordan was the only one who could do it for a while, but now any 6 or 7 guy who's long and can jump can do that. So you need to separate yourself somehow.
My only problem with the props is I find that it's just guys jumping over something for the most part. They're not doing any sort of tricky dunk. They're just jumping over something, like Jeremy Evans jumped over a painting of himself.
But did he do the painting is my question. If he did that painting and then he brought the painting out there, I mean, that's some serious creativity.
Yeah, he should definitely win if he got that.
Yeah, but and he signed it, so it's going to be worth something.
I thought that overall it was a pretty good dunk contest. I thought that Kenneth Faried had the best dunk in the first round, but he couldn't.
Yeah, he followed it up with a pretty lame dunk. He didn't get to, he missed a bunch of them during the minute and a half time. Because that's the thing, they give you a minute and a half now, and you can miss as many dunks as you want until you get your one that you want, until you get the one down. But even then, the guys get tired and it takes them a long time, and they're doing these dunks 5 or 6 times.
I think it also affects the scores when you have someone that keeps missing their dunks.
Exactly. Because there was, in the olden days when it was Neek and Dominique Wilkins and Michael Jordan, they got one chance, and if they put it down on the first one, that's something to be proud of. That's an accomplishment if you get it on the first try.
Yeah.
Also at the three-point contest, Kyrie Irving managed to win, and he's definitely won this weekend at the All-Star game. He was definitely someone whose stock rose in the eyes of at least me and maybe some other people who haven't seen him play in Cleveland.
Yeah, if you haven't seen the clip of him in the Young Stars game crossing up Brandon Knight and making him fall, that was probably the best move of the All-Star weekend.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a bunch of good players on the court there, and he's also, he can shoot the basketball, he can score, he can dribble, he's got great handles. His handles looked almost as good as Chris Paul's, who I thought no one could do, but Chris Paul looked really good in the All-Star game this weekend too. He obviously won the MVP, but you see how fluid he is in a game like that, where there's just a bunch of athletes on the floor. He was in his element.
Yeah, it's kind of like a Jason Kidd when he was in the All-Star games.
So that kind of got us talking about what other All-Star festivities that we actually like, because we know that the Pro Bowl is probably the worst, the most lackluster. We know that we like the NHL skills competition because these guys in the NHL, they're so skilled when it comes to puck handling and things that you don't necessarily see on a full-time basis on the ice or in games, but they're incredible. I know you like it as well.
Yeah, I also like the skating when they have the races, especially the defensemen. Those guys skate faster backwards than I could dream of skating forwards.
You have to. They're such terrific athletes, and after trying to skate, and looking foolish, watching those guys skate, like making the turns and going at full speed and like keeping their edges, that's unbelievable. And
they have the creativity contest. I know that one, it's kind of like the dunk contest. There's some props involved in that one, but some of the moves they pull off are just...
Exactly. It's a little bit different because you're used to seeing you don't always see the circus goal in the NHL, but you always see the circus dunk in the NBA.
Yeah.
You're getting off the window. Blake Griffin, his head's above the rim every single time. It's getting there to that point where we've seen it a lot. So home run derby, we also like the home run derby just because, guys, chicks dig the long ball, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
So we like that. But we wanted to talk more about NFL. Like what could they do? What do you think they could do to supplement the Pro Bowl or do something different to get away from that?
Well, I know they have the college skills competition. That's they have a lot of, they throw passes to the receivers catch passes. There's obstacle course and stuff. I mean, I would pay money to watch Aaron Rodgers throw footballs into tight windows all day.
Back shoulder fades, things like that. I can agree with that.
You could have races, relay races, big man races.
I think maybe even having almost like the combine, having guys run in the open field just to see who's like the fastest foot speed, that kind of stuff. Like guys like Percy Harvin, who are incredible athletes, see what they can do with agility-wise around like obstacles, kind of like the NBA skills, because these guys are the most skilled guys in their sport, in their respective sports, and I would love to see like what happens in practice, what everyone gets to see in practice, that's not translated to the field.
Yeah, I do think there was once a time where they had sort of a skills competition in the Pro Bowl. I remember them having a bench press type competition way back when, and Larry Allen, when I'd like to see Big Vince in that one.
Big Vince probably put up a lot of weight, or at least a lot of time.
Like to see him race some of the quarterbacks too.
He did say this year that he could beat Tom Brady in a foot race. They asked him on one of the post-game shows. Oh, absolutely, he says, I could beat Tom Brady in a race.
I believe it.
So quickly, the NBA is reaching the trade deadline. It's actually Thursday. So we just wanted to ask you what moves you think, because the Celtics have been rumored that they might be clearing some house and trying to rebuild for the future. So what moves do you think are imminent to go down, and what do you think the Celtics should do coming with the trade deadline?
The Celtics are in a tough spot because what they probably should do is trade Garnett and Pierce, but those are two iconic guys, and the fan in me would like to see them retire as Celtics. There's been some rumors of a Dwight Howard for Rondo trade. I don't really like that trade either. Not that I don't like Dwight Howard, but that's a half year of Dwight Howard. There's no guarantee he'll stay. He probably wouldn't stay.
That's the thing. He won't guarantee anybody that he'll sign a contract. So he's basically picking where he wants to go in free agency, which I guess is his right, but at the same time, if you're trading somebody like Rajon, you need to know that he's going to be with you long term.
Yeah.
Because I think, go ahead.
He's also looked like a shell of himself this year.
Yeah. I'm sure there's a lot of factors going into that. His health probably, new environment in LA, it's a humongous market. People are humongous expectations. I mean, you couldn't put any more expectations on a guy who gets traded like that. We talked about it last week, Will and I did, about how you pick your spot in the NBA now. You pick where you want to go. Miami, Big Three, these guys out in LA, excuse me. So the same thing with the Clippers, Blake Griffin and Chris Paul and all those guys. So I think Dwight Howard, that trade would be good for the Celtics, but do you see anything, other deals in the NBA that are going to go down because of just the way the contracts are laid out?
Josh Smith is all but guaranteed to get traded. Mark Stein on ESPN said that the Hawks are basically telling executives that they are trading Josh Smith.
Okay.
The Celtics are one of the rumored teams, but they probably wouldn't be able to do that without parting with Paul Pierce. And I don't know if I would like to do that, even though it might make them better long term.
Right. All these deals could possibly make them better long term, but you have to think about what they did when they won the championship and what that meant to the city, and do you dismantle a team like that? It's hard to really, to make that commitment at this point. So we're going to go ahead and cut to a segment. We're going to read some stuff on Twitter. We had a lot of comments on Twitter that we didn't get to last week. So we're going to go ahead and do that, and then we're going to bring up our next guest. So hang tight. Hey, everyone. I'm just going to read some Twitter off the computer here, so be a little bit easier than doing it in the studio. We missed some people last week on their favorite sports movie, so I just wanted to kind of give us some shout-outs. My sister Caitlin actually says Sandlot and Angels in the Outfield. I'm going to give a shout-out to her. She turned 25 today, so everyone wish her a happy birthday. Cory Dows says Sandlot, Rookie of the Year, Remember the Titans, Little Big League, and of course Major League. Lauren Taper says Mighty Ducks, all of them, and then Friday Night Lights, and then she's wondering if Happy Gilmore counts, and it does. We totally forgot about Happy Gilmore, so thank you. Jack Trade at E.J. My boy EJ says Coach Carter, Sandlot, Remember the Titans, Rookie of the Year, and of course Space Jam. Check E.J. out on Twitter. He's got some new songs coming out, so make sure you get on that. Amanda says Miracle, Sandlot, does Love and Basketball count? Which it does. A League of Their Own and Invictus. And then she said she forgot Space Jam, but that's obviously number 1 through 5 for her. Pedro Barbosa says Sandlot, Remember the Titans, Miracle, Space Jam. One movie for each sport, which is a good way to do it. Sam Casey says there's only one that matters, which is Fever Pitch. Couldn't agree less. Rudy, A League of Their Own, or that movie where the dog plays basketball, says Meg Chicky, and I'm assuming she means Airbud. Thank you, Airbud. Yeah, so that's pretty much it we had for this week. We're going to work on getting you guys a poll for next week, so keep a lookout for that, and just follow us on Twitter at avsports_ACTV. Thanks, guys. Thank you. Hey, everyone. Welcome back to Around the Valley. We have our second guest, John Leonard, up here. He's going to come and help us talk about the NFL offseason, the draft and the combine, which is coming up. The combine starts the 20th, and it's going to run through the 26th. As we all know, it's the gauntlet of physical and mental aptitude tests for the NFL. It's where everyone does their research for the upcoming draft, which is probably the most intensive out of any sport, just because it all happens on one day, but it's over a whole college football career, which is pretty important. So these teams spend a lot of time and a lot of money doing this. So I want to bring in John Leonard, and I want I want to ask your thoughts on this offseason. What you think the Patriots need to do in the offseason, in the draft, or in free agency to attack their needs?
Well, the big glaring issue is Wes Welker. What are you going to do about Aqib Talib and Sebastian Vollmer, who are all, their deals are up, and do you franchise any of them? They already said they're not going to franchise Wes Welker, and they weren't even going to play him this year, and then they were going to go with Julian Edelman, and then he got hurt, and so he comes back, and so now it doesn't seem like they're going to, give him, their Patriots are pretty cutthroat, they don't they cut all their ties, you've seen it before. So if you don't keep Wes Welker, what do you do? Do you go with Julian Edelman? Is he ready to take that spot? Because he's that same kind of player.
Sure.
But if you don't, then what do you do? Do you go to the free agency, or do you go with a trade? Like an intriguing thing was Percy Harvin. Says he wants out of Minnesota, and he's a Wes Welker type player. He's a slot receiver. He could probably work in seamlessly. He's a great athlete. Bill Belichick would probably love that.
Right, because he does like Florida guys. We talked about this a little bit. He likes guys from the University of Florida because that's where Urban Meyer coached.
Likes versatile players.
Like versatile players who know how to play football, but they can do a lot of things.
Hernandez.
Exactly. Hernandez. Imagine Hernandez and Percy Harvin both playing, halfbacks out of the backfield. Exactly. So they're both kind of that same player. Hernandez is a little bit more rugged. Percy Harvin's more. He's a little bit injury prone. He had some migraine issues and he has had some leg issues, but definitely an electric player, someone that I would love for them to acquire.
Yeah. This is what the Patriots do. It's kind of their bread and butter.
Exactly.
It's like misfit toys, I guess you could say. Like he's got some attitude issues, I guess. He kind of wants out. You can kind of say he's being a diva, but that's what they do. They take in these kind of players, either like old players that are kind of like that, or and they can coach them up, and usually it's a success. And so
when they brought in Rodney Harrison to secure the secondary for their latest championship run in 07-08, I think that parallels kind of what's going on in this offseason, because there are a couple veteran secondary players out there, Charles Woodson and Ed Reed, namely, who both they make a lot of money, but Woodson just got cut by the Packers. So what do you think the Patriots are going to do to address the secondary, which was clearly their biggest issue this past season?
Ideally, they could sign someone like Charles Woodson. I don't think Ed Reed plays anywhere but Baltimore, but it is a deep draft this year. It's been said that this is one of the better safety drafts in a long time. I think that's the biggest weakness in the Pats secondary right now, other than us not being able to get a pass rush for most of the time. They tried to get a safety last year in the second round. They drafted Tavon Wilson. He didn't really do the job. But if they can re-sign Talib, I think the secondary would be in a lot better place. But the Pats have some cap room to work with, too, for a good team. Right.
And I know we're always excited about the Patriots because they draft so well. And not only do they draft well, but they trade well in the fact that they get draft picks for guys who they don't need. They're expendable to that roster. Guys who can't do more than one thing are not going to hang around on a Belichick roster unless you're Tom Brady, who the one thing he does is win. So that's fine. But with the Combine coming up, everyone puts emphasis on the draft. They market it really well. They have a big thing in New York. And I want to talk about the Combine because we know that Matt Barkley isn't going to throw. He's probably one of the top quarterback prospects, but he hurt his shoulder at the end of the year, so he doesn't want to throw. He's going to throw at his pro day, the USC pro day later in March. And then Lacey, the running back from Alabama, is not going to run because of some injury issues. So I want to talk about what do you guys like about the Combine? What do you think it's staying there? And what are your thoughts?
Surprisingly, the Combine's actually pretty exciting. I think this is kind of like what we got with the skills competition, whatever. Like you get to see people just doing cutting out unbelievable routes, and
exactly. Well, and they air it now on the NFL Network,
pretty
much all the way through. So you get to catch coverage the whole week.
And some of it's a little, like some like the linemen, like the non-skill positions, like watching that. It's a little thing, but it gives you a good feel. You're gonna get excited, like if your team's got like kind of like a flag on somebody that they might check, and you see this guy out and he's got unreal skill. You get jacked
so
up.
It's good for a football fan to watch these kind of things. But they did adding another intelligence test in addition to the Wonderlic test. So there was something that came out last week that the Chiefs GM said that he wouldn't have drafted Brandon Weeden so high based on his grades, based on his his college grades and his ability on the aptitude test. So what are your thoughts on those kind of things? Do you think that they should judge the athletes on that so harshly? And is that a real concern for the GMs?
Well, allegedly the new intelligence test is more suited for football players. The Wonderlic is kind of a joke, I think, as a test. It doesn't really tell how good you are at football or how much you can understand tape, understand coverages and stuff like that. I think if it's found that this new test is actually better, then they should put some stock in it, because you've seen so often that some players are just great athletes and they excel within college, but when everyone is a level playing field athletically, the guys that separate themselves from the top are guys that put in the work in the tape room and can understand it.
Right.
Tom Brady's not necessarily the most athletically gifted quarterback, but
Listen, he's not necessarily mobile. When he gets out of the pocket, he gets taken down quite a bit. He doesn't elude any defenders, but he's great at putting in the work. He watches film. He's dedicated to the room. So I'm sure that even if he's lacking in some of the material intelligence, like a Ryan Fitzpatrick who scored almost a perfect score in the Wonderlic, but he can't seem to throw it to his own receiver. So it's a double-edged sword. You don't know what you're getting. It's kind of an analysis at that point.
Yeah, I heard, one executive compared the Wonderlic to an SAT type test. That's not really a good measure of how you.
I wouldn't want people measuring me on my SAT scores. I was nervous. It's tough. I'm sure it's tough for those players because they're not. It's nothing they're normally expected to do. Normally they're expected to go perform on the football field, and having to do it in the classroom or in a classroom setting I'm sure it's a little different for some of those guys.
Yeah.
So we talked pretty much about the offseason of the Patriots. I just want to talk about who do you think is set up for a run next year? Like, who do you think of the teams? Obviously, the 49ers are set up and ready to go, and the Ravens are still going to be a good team if they sign Joe Flacco. But who else that's not really on the radar do you think might be a better team next year?
You would think Detroit. They had it 2 years ago. They had a pretty good run, and then it was unbelievable how they underperformed.
They had a lot with internal issues.
Yeah.
A lot of like Titus Young, for instance, who was a team cancer, that kind of stuff.
Ndamukong Suh.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think they fixed that. I mean, they have just, Matt Stafford's a great quarterback. He could be top 5 easily.
I think sometimes he relies on his arm and his athleticism almost too much.
And Calvin Johnson.
And Calvin Johnson. He throws to the best wide receiver almost, probably going to be ever at the end of his career if you project his statistics. But the Detroit Lions, they had so many internal issues and so much discipline problems that someone has to coach that team up. Like, got to get them on the right track like Bill Belichick would. But who else do you think is going to be a force next year?
The Giants. I don't think you can never count out them. Any team that has a good quarterback and can rush the passer is a team that you don't want to count out. The Steelers, even though they're older now, the usual suspects. But I think a team that could be on the rise is the Tampa Bay Bucks. They added some good pieces in the draft last year. Josh Freeman showed up in shape and had a pretty decent year. Doug Martin looks real good.
My concern about the Bucks is I've said the Bucks are going to be the next team for the last 3 seasons. I've drafted Josh Freeman in multiple fantasy leagues and been not disappointed, but I say a little bit underwhelmed because I had thought that he was going to step up to that elite status. Last year he showed some flashes. He has a terrific arm. He's surprisingly mobile for a guy his size, and he does command that offense. And with such a good running game, like you said, Doug Martin, who was an incredible fantasy player this year. I'm not sure who someone in our league had him, and he goes off for 200 and something yards that one game and 4 touchdowns.
Yeah,
just coming out of nowhere.
Game changer.
Exactly. So I like the Patriots' chances. Obviously, whenever you have Tom, quite frankly, you got Tom Brady, and that's all you need. As Stephen A. Smith would say, that is pretty much all you need.
Quite frankly.
Okay, so that pretty much wraps up football. We're going to go ahead and jump over to fantasy baseball. So we're going to say goodbye to our guest, John Leonard. For now, we're going to bring on Eric Campbell, and he's our fantasy expert, so he's going to come help us out for a couple minutes. Thanks, John. Okay, everybody, welcome back to Around the Valley. We've got our other guest, Eric Campbell, here. I want to introduce Eric Campbell. These two guys are actually in my fantasy baseball league. We have a pretty serious 10-man fantasy league that we had for about 3 years now, right? 3 years? Am I right?
Going on our 4th.
Going on our 4th year, okay. So we have the best record in the year last year, the regular season, and the worst record in the regular season. And then 2011 champion, actually, was Eric Campbell with the Pembroke Shamwowsers. I just wanted to welcome you guys into our fantasy discussion because we've been excited about this for a couple weeks now. Basically, the first thing I wanted to start off with is the MVP race from last year came down to Miguel Cabrera and Mike Trout, 2 of the most amazing seasons we've seen in a while statistically, but also just watching the players because they're so gifted. I want to ask you, Eric, what about the Mickey Trout debate? Who do you think, ranking fantasy-wise, also who do you think is the better player? Who do you think should win the MVP? Just kind of give me your thoughts on that.
I give Miguel Cabrera my #1 player award. I mean, winning the Triple Crown last year, that's a huge feat. I think Mike Trout obviously has a lot of skills that fantasy teams at least, would like to acquire, but Miguel Cabrera has proven year in and year out that he can put up these type of numbers. Mike Trout, I think we can expect a little bit of regression from him. So I give it to Miguel Cabrera. In terms of not fantasy, just on a team, I guess you'd want to take Mike Trout, obviously younger.
As a general manager, you got to take Mike Trout. And I know that you had a chance to get Mike Trout in the offseason last year, or you drafted him. You drafted him, and then you dropped him because he wasn't at the big league level, and then he came to the big. Everyone knows what happened once he got called up. He went on an absolute tear. So as a GM, you definitely want to talk about Mike Trout.
Yeah, I think in real life, he's probably the better player if you factor in defense and stuff like that. In fantasy, obviously, you don't work in defense, so I think Cabrera is probably a better player. And like Eric said, probably a little bit of regression with Mike Trout last year. He probably can't have a better year than he had last year.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought he should have won MVP, but I can really see it either way. His team didn't make the playoffs, so I think that affected him.
Yeah, the way that they vote for the MVP is kind of like an old boys club. We noticed that the Hall of Fame is the same way, where no one got in this year, and that was kind of a head scratcher just because who was on the ballot. There was some serious talent there. With even the PED guys, aside from them, there were guys on that ballot who probably should have got in hindsight. But there's always next year, I guess, is the way they look at it. But the MVP race, I obviously am excited that Miguel Cabrera won the Triple Crown. And the MVP because I have him on the McGriff Prime Dogs, and I'm sure you guys are all excited about the season because you know that my team is loaded. But I'm going to digress. So basically, I wanted to ask you guys what your top rankings are. Eric, can you give me your top 10 players? Just list them down for me, and then we'll kind of pick through those. We'll go to Bob after. We'll pick through those.
Absolutely. I got Miguel Cabrera, number 1, as we said. Mike Trout, number 2. Ryan Braun. Interesting to see what's going to happen with his PED status, but
Right.
I got him number 3.
Because the bigs are doing blood testing now for HGH, so we got to, he's
His
been
his name is popping up on numerous
and
lists.
he's tested positive more than once, or
Absolutely.
one time, but who knows? Who knows what's coming? Continue.
Matt Kemp, number 4. Robbie Cano, got to go number 5. Clayton Kershaw, my first pitcher, give him number 6. Albert Pujols comes in at 7. I got Carlos Gonzalez as 8. Justin Verlander is 9, and then my boy Joey Votto, number 10.
So Matt Kemp, I'm excited about Matt Kemp because he's also on my roster, but he had a kind of a down year a couple years ago, came back to have a really big year, and I ended up getting him in a trade from Bob, so that worked out for both of us. But what do you think about Matt Kemp? What do you think he's going to do in LA this year with the team that they've assembled out there?
I think the big question with Matt Kemp is whether he's going to be healthy. 2 years ago, he was the best player in the league, I thought. Should have won the MVP, I thought, but Ryan Braun had a great year too. But he missed a lot of games. He plays pretty hard. He plays center field. That's an injury-prone position. But I think if he stays healthy, the team around him is a lot better. He's got a lot more hitters around him. He's got Adrian Gonzalez. He's got Hanley Ramirez now. It's not a hitter's park, but that didn't affect him a few years ago. I think if he's healthy, then he'll be top 5 player. But
the way he sprays the ball too is good for that stadium because it's the deep gaps and the deep center field. So he's going to pick up those doubles and triples, but he also has the power to go the long ball, and he's seen that. He's shown that a couple of years. I also like Carlos Gonzalez because he does hit in cores, and we all know what happens to hitters when they hit in cores. The OPSs at home and on the road, their splits are always drastic. So Carlos Gonzalez is definitely a good young player. What do you think about him?
Absolutely, Gonzalez. I mean, because he can steal too. You got to appreciate that fantasy-wise.
The five categories. You got
absolutely, he's a 5-star stud, and he can do it all pretty much. He's, like as we said, defensive categories don't really count in fantasy, but he's a great defensive outfielder as well. But young player, like you said, with Carlos Gonzalez, and hitting the Coors Field, you got to appreciate that. That's good for a fantasy team.
And if we're going to talk about studs, I think the studliest of all studs would be Justin Verlander.
Yes.
Yeah, reigning, he's the Cy Young Award winner from 2 years ago, and I mean, just an unbelievable postseason performance.
He's Mr. Consistent on the mound, and when you got a great offense behind you, like in Detroit, that's also going to help the win category, which is going to help your fantasy team as well.
I know that Justin Verlander is probably one of the best pitchers in the game, but you have to think that Steven Strasburg, who kind of doesn't remind you necessarily of Justin Verlander, but just the way that he dominates hitters and his stuff, you have to think Justin Verlander.
If you can guarantee Strasburg healthy for a whole year, I think he'll put up similar numbers to Verlander. He strikes out more guys per 9 innings, but they do keep him on a tight pitch count. Jim Lewin lets Verlander throw 130 pitches a game.
Right. Well, Verlander has never had any elbow injuries.
No.
Right. And knock on wood, I'm not wishing anything on him, but a guy like that is almost like a specimen athletically. How does someone throw that many innings, that many pitches, that hard consistently, and not have some sort of injury that leads them to kind of fall from their elite status? But he's been only getting better each season and into the postseason.
Right. I mean, I feel like starting pitchers nowadays, you're pretty much guaranteed Tommy John surgery at one point in your career, especially someone like Verlander, who, as we said, you can go out there and pitch 130 pitches per game.
Yep. So I wanted to ask you guys a little bit more on, actually, Bob, let's get to your top 10 real quick because I want to see if there's any differences from those.
Okay, our top 3 is the same. I have Cabrera and then Trout and Braun. I would probably have Braun number 1 if the PED cloud wasn't hanging over him, because if he gets suspended, that's 50 games right away. So he's not going to put up the whole season production, but he's a power speed guy. He's a consistent hitter. I have Robbie Cano 4. Second base is not
premium. It's an absolute premium position.
not a lot of guys there. I have Joey Votto 5. If he's healthy, I think he's the best hitting first baseman in the league. Then Matt Kemp and Andrew McCutchen. Those two are very similar players, power speed guys. I have Pujols after that. He's Albert Pujols. He hits 300 with 30 home runs almost every year.
He's in a great lineup, too.
Yeah, he's in a great lineup now. He's got Trout and Hamilton around him. I have Carlos Gonzalez. We talked about him. After that, I have Troy Tulowitzki, who plays shortstop. Not a lot of guys there. Also hits in cores, but last year, as I know all too well, he missed almost the entire season. So hopefully he's back healthy.
Right. He's been injury prone, I guess you can say it, but when he is back, he is the best shortstop. And you commented on this, the best shortstop.
Yes, I would definitely say Troy
stands out.
Tulo is. It's funny though, in our league, I'm keeping Stalin Castro. I think he's going to be next
Stalin
couple
Castro,
years.
I mean, he's had some, I guess you'd say, behavioral issues or on the field issues where he was kind of demonstrative towards his
Very
coach.
bad defensive.
Yeah,
as
bad
well.
defensive, but he has so much talent.
He's
and
only
he can
21,
hit, and he's
too.
only 21. He's a young guy, so that team, I think, well, Matt Garza's undergoing an MRI, so we'll see what happens to him. But they're not,
They need him.
they're not built to make a run in the Central, especially. I mean, they're losing the Astros out of the division, so they're not getting that powder puff where they're going to kick around. I know you're a big Astros fan.
I am.
How do you feel about them coming to the American League?
It's going to be a team that a lot of teams are going to beat up on. I'm looking forward to the Red Sox traveling to the Astrodome. I feel like there's going to be a lot of home runs in that park.
Yeah,
Especially
Minute
with
Maid.
some AL teams coming in with some DHs.
Exactly. That's the thing. They have a short left field porch right there, but that weird hill in center field, which I don't really
I'm
like
a
at
big
all.
fan of the flagpole right on the field.
Okay, so I think we're just going to kind of jump over from fantasy baseball real quick to the last little segment on the NHL. I just want to talk about what teams you think, it's about a quarter of the season, what teams you think are underperforming a little bit. Yeah, so that's the timer for the last one, so we're good with that. What teams do you think are underperforming a little bit that are going to perform better toward down the stretch?
I think Philly is the big one. They're out of the playoff hunt if the season were to end today. But you look at that roster, there's so much talent there. They have two lines of scorers. The other one is Buffalo. I'm not as sold on them as I am Philly, but they have Ryan Miller, they have Thomas Vanek. They have good offense, but they haven't been playing any sort of defense. And a team I might think would regress is Montreal. Right now they're leading the Bruins division. They've played less games, or they've played more games, so that's probably why they're leading. But last year that was the third worst team in the league, and now all of a sudden they're the third best team in the league. I don't think that will sustain, even though they have a new coach and they're playing better defensive hockey.
And so, I mean, the NHL is not really much of a shaker and a mover at the trade deadline. It's more teams who need a veteran defenseman or teams who need another offensive guy who can score the puck or can shut down both sides of the ice, all three zones. Campbell, what do you think the Bruins should do? Do you think that there's any avenues that they can take, or do you think that they're all set to kind of stand pat?
I mean, I think it's hard to recommend the Bruins make any changes to having such a good start. But you can always bring in a really offensive powerhouse person like Jerome Gilna. He would certainly help their team out, but it's what you're really going to give up. So if I had to recommend anything, I would say maybe get a goal scorer. We're hoping Tyler Seguin could turn it around at some point. Hasn't happened yet. That's got a lot of fans worried about that. But I would say get someone who can put the puck in the net, but it's hard to recommend they make any changes with how successful they've been.
On Tyler Seguin for a second, I know he's not putting the goals in the net like you would assume he would or you'd hope he would for you on paper, but he's playing so good.
Yeah.
He's playing really well in all of the zones. He's even playing good defense. He's hustling. He's all over the ice, and the guy can skate.
He's playing a lot more physical.
He's a lot more physical. He's put on some weight in the offseason, which a lot of guys did. A lot of guys were make sure they came back in shape because that's how the NHL players work. But I think Tyler Seguin can step up to be that guy. He's still only 21 years old. He just turned 21, a couple weeks ago. So then I know that you think that the Bruins are probably best served to stand pat, or do you think that they want to go out and make a move?
Well, if I was the Bruins, if it meant only giving up prospects and picks for a good player, I would consider making the move, but I wouldn't trade anyone off of the roster because I think we have good chemistry, our lines are set, and each player knows their role. And I think Seguin will bounce back, like we all said, because right now he's just having bad puck luck. His shooting percentage is not very high, and that's a guy with unbelievable offensive talent.
And then you have a guy like Brad Marchand who's good. He's a great hockey player. He's got 8 goals already this year to Sagan's 3. So you have to think.
Seguin has an empty net.
Right. So and then his Brad Marchand's shooting percentage is incredibly high. So those guys are going to kind of come back to normal. And I think the Bruins are going to be okay. I don't think they're going to need to make a move. But like if it's something like a Thomas Caberlet who comes in and kind of secures the end of that defense, although he didn't play tremendously well. You can't say the move didn't work because they won the Stanley Cup. So even if it's just a guy who secures the spot on the roster so they have depth, that's going to be fine. I think they're going to be okay.
Maybe even, I think our strength of the team is our third and fourth lines because those are two lines of good hockey players, solid hockey players. I think maybe a backup goalie, a veteran.
Sure, somebody who can come in and stop because Hudobin is young and he's unproven So
he's been okay.
He's been okay, but at the same time, it's a long 48 games because the way that the schedule is crunched together. So I think the Bruins are okay. I think they're going to make another playoff run. So hopefully we can see them do well this summer. I think that's pretty much all the time we have for today, folks. So I want to thank my guests, Bob Dalton, Eric Campbell, and John Leonard for coming out today and helping us out while Will was gone. So I hope everyone has a good week, and let's hope that some crazy stuff happens in sports so we can talk about this again. Have these guys on here sometime soon. Thanks.